In this video, I'm going to introduce you to a series of documents used for project management known as estimates. So, as a designer is creating the documentation to create a custom pillow and get it delivered to the client's site, there's really an important step here right at the initial phases where the designer has to gather pricing so that the designer has some kind of idea about how much this pillow is going to cost the design firm and then how much they can charge the client for it. So if we look at this sketch that we saw in the preceding video, we can see that this is actually a very informal estimate for the labor to create this pillow. Now, you may think that this is maybe a little too informal, but actually, when you're dealing with workrooms that create pillows or draperies, they're local. They are usually right in the same town or city as the client or the designer. And a lot of times, all the designer does is email or fax a photo of what they want. And then the workroom will just very informally write the cost to do this. Now, I've seen this type of informal estimating done for pillows, for drapery treatments. I've seen it done for even custom pieces of furniture. So don't be surprised if this is the method that workrooms, in the local area where you're designing, do it. It's totally legitimate and actually a very accepted practice. So you can see to create this pillow from the workroom, it's $85 per pillow, and you can see there's a 2-week lead time. Lead time refers to how long after the workroom receives the materials that the designer can expect to get their pillow. Now, it's not just the labor to sew all of these elements together, but it's also the material. So this drawing doesn't show the size that this pillow is going to be, and that might be a piece of really important information that's missing. However, it may not be written here because the designer may have some kind of understanding with the workroom that says every pillow we design, it's always going to be 16 by 16 inches, for example, unless otherwise noted. So that's why the dimensions may not be on this drawing, but typically they would be there. Now, you can see here that the materials also includes not just the thread, or the fabric and trim, which is purchased separately, but the materials that this is referring to is actually like the stuffing of the pillow and the lining. So if the designer has a standard with this workroom that they always use 18 by 18 down feather pillows that have a lining so that the parts of the feathers don't poke through the fabric, then that would be included in the materials. Or if the materials are always kind of that fluffy batting material, that would be also included in the material. So that's what's being covered here. And again, $85 each. That's the cost from the workroom to the designer. So that's one of the costs associated with the prices of the pillow. And so that's the first estimate that we see here. The second one, this is for the cost of the fabric, trim, labor, and materials. Now, you may also be thinking that this is a little informal, but this is one way that maybe small design firms handle the estimates. And so what this is actually the handwritten information from the designer starting to calculate what the costs associated with it are. Now you can see labor and materials. We already calculated that. And see faxed estimate from the pillow workroom. That's the one that we just saw. Now, we also can look back on this and see that we're going to need fabric here, and we're going to need this tape here, and then the brush French here. So there's 3 other materials that are being used here. So you can see the fabric here, we need 2 yards. Now, the designer knows we need 2 yards, either because they can estimate it based on the size of the pillow and the width of the fabric, or because the workroom told them how much fabric and trim they needed when they provided this estimate. So you can see it's 2 yards at $65 a yard. Now, In this case, the main fabric is coming from the inventory of the designer. It's maybe somewhere in their studio, or it's left over, or they have some kind of inventory. Otherwise, the fabric would be coming from a fabric manufacturer. And so you can see not only have we specified where it's coming from and how much we need and the cost, but how many are available, how many yards are available. So you can see that's the estimate for the cost of the fabric. Now for the trim, you can see here that the designer has estimated that we need 6 yards of one type of trim, and then you can see 3 yards of the other. Now you can see that the cost per yard has been written here. And the reason why the designer knows the cost per yard is because the designer either has a price list from the manufacturer that has a list of all the SKU numbers for each product and the cost per yard, or the designer has special access to the trade to access the website of the manufacturers. They can log in, select the trim pieces that they want, find and see beautiful pictures of them, and access the pricing. Now, you can see that underneath there, it's a very simple, almost like a specification or description of the product that it's going to be. And so you can see we've got the manufacturer for both of them. And then you can see there's the item number here and here. And then you can see the designer has actually called to find out if this material is in stock. If it's not sitting there at the manufacturer's warehouse, then the designer could have to wait a really long time for the mill to create new stock. And so the designer doesn't want to do that. The designer wants to make sure that what they want is in stock, ready to ship as soon as these manufacturers receive the purchase order. So when the designer is selecting the material and verifying the price and verifying the stock, the designer may also order what we call a CFA, which is a cutting for approval. And that's when the manufacturer of the product will take a little snip of what they have in their warehouse to make sure that, and they'll send it to the designer, and then the designer will make sure that the color is good and that the feel is good and that this is in fact the product that they want to use. So you can see the total cost to the designer for those two elements are written right here. And then again, we've got the labor and materials. So the cost of the materials for those two pillows to the designer is just under $700. And the designer has to have all that information together before they can propose it to the client. And so now you have a better understanding of the specific project management documents referred to as estimates. And it's the designer estimating the cost of the product from all of the manufacturers involved in its creation.